place. Ladies and gentlemen, I do hope that our presentation will be for you interesting, even though some of you might have been informed about the results of our research, because week in, week out, month in, month out, we progress with our research, and it seems to me that we continue to find out novel things. For those of you who do not know about the positioning of a national broadcasting council in Poland, for more than 20 years, the council was only in charge of radio and television broadcasting. So for some of you, it may be quite unclear why we are now in charge of the internet content. So for those of you who see it quite misleading, let me explain that back in 2013, the Polish Broadcasting Act has been amended to be in line with the EU audiovisual directive, and which authorizes the Council to control at least some contents on the net. The contents which, in line with the directive definition, are audio-visual mass media services on demand, including the services that are provided on the internet. And this amendment has changed completely our approach to contents and researching into contents. In our Broadcasting Council, we had never been prepared professionally to tackle this new task, and over the first year, we needed to focus to the biggest providers, the ones who are such big providers as Onet.pl, Interia.pl, Kinoplex.pl. So the big providers, official legal providers of on-demand content, have associated themselves together around the subjects which are of our concern. And back in 2014, we reached an agreement and established a code of good practices with them. On the basis of this code of good practices, we defined effective safeguards for the internet operation. In a nutshell, our providers committed themselves not to broadcast porn content or content with the presentation of unjustified violence without appropriate safeguards to be built in the internet. I have no time to discuss it further on, but on our website you will find details about this provision. So as you can see, we have a legal basis, the provision, the act. We have providers who are quite happy to understand the subject, and very soon have we realized that what we are doing is just a drop in a bucket, and that big providers, yes, they are happy to be law-abiding, to abide by the law, but this doesn't mean that the problem of pornography or violence available on the net has been finally resolved. Let me tell you that for us, the efficient safeguard to be built in is either PIN code, and PIN code is very successfully used by all cable TV providers, where access is limited by PIN code, and it really works very well indeed. And the biggest problem that we have encountered was what to do with the services on the net, which are free of charge. We didn't want to consent to SMS payments of fees, nor on boards. to be put up, and we decided that the way to verify on the net should be a credit card, not the payment card, because access to payment cards is available also to minors under 18 years of age, but the credit card per se. And big providers came to terms with it, but at present, and I have some problem with the next slide. At present,
Przepraszam.
Unfortunately, the question cannot be heard in the booth because it is asked without a microphone.
To znaczy odradza pan korzystanie.
Apologies. If you have any questions, ladies and gentlemen, would you please use microphones? Otherwise, interpretation will not be provided.
Ja może jednak wrócimy do tego.
If you allow me, sir, I will come back to your point in a moment after my presentation, because what I want to do is to take stock of what we have done, and I don't want to speak about safety of internet transactions using credit cards, because this is a different story. Yes, and once again, would you please bear in mind that should you have any questions or queries, would you please address them through the microphone? So, all in all, we decided to look at the porn sites which are illegal, which have not been registered, that have not been registered in the National Council, which do not have any safeguards built in. And the way to start was to select the ones who were somehow connected with their operations, with Poland. Michał Wiśniewski will tell you about the subject in a moment. In our view, those very numerous operators which make pornographic content available without any safeguards, not only do they act in violation of the Polish National Broadcasting Act, but they also infringe on the provisions of a criminal code. There are at least two provisions in the Polish criminal code mentioned here on the slide. Why have I selected those two? Because in Article 200, there are two paragraphs. One which provides that a minor under 18 years of age has no right to encounter such content, even by incident. If we see that certain contents, like porn contents, are not protected properly, such a situation will happen. Also, on such sites, there are so many links and information about other websites. And the new provision has been added into the criminal code in Poland to penalize and to delegalize such operations. What have we done? Let me describe to you what we have done. The diagnosis of the problem is down to Michał Wiśniewski, so I will hand over to him first. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Ladies and gentlemen, apparently it has been only Chuck Norris who read all the internet and viewed all the porn movies on the net from the beginning to the end. But this would be like head-breaking challenge. Nobody hoped that we would achieve any success because we were not so much preoccupied with porn content as such, but with a Polish porn content. So pay websites with Polish hosting on Polish servers, and the ones which were administrating such websites and were editorially responsible and liable for contents that were put up. So we needed a sample. To this end, we hired Pentagon Research, an external provider, who prepared a database of 60,000 websites containing pornographic content. After the process of verification, it turned out that 2.5 thousand of such websites were main domains, and it is now estimated that there are more than millions, almost 1 billion of pornographic websites on the net worldwide. However, most of them operate as a subdomain of another main website, and this 2.5 thousand that we have calculated represents only 5% of the total of the sample. So perhaps the size of pornography and the number of incidents is not unlimited. The next step we took was to verify how many out of those 2.5 thousand domains are the ones that are somehow connected with Poland. And we arrived at the number of 635. Every fourth site was somehow related to Poland. So to me, it looks like a huge number. The next thing we have done in order to eliminate the websites which are not eligible under the Polish law, we can only handle VOD, video on demand services. So the next step we took was to verify how many out of 635 sites are the ones that are immediately underlying the Polish legislation. Here we have a slide about the Polish pornography on the net, but the sample was extensive enough to allow us to structure it down into particular categories of porn on the net. One third of it is VOD, that is companies. So if that is films. So the prevalent content in terms of porn contents on the net um, uh, is provided by films, by movies. The other part, the other one third are inactive sites or links. So during the very initial survey, these were active sites which offered porn content, but 3 months later, in the process of verification, one third of them was no longer active. Then we have links sending you to subdomains, and we are somehow redirected, rerouted to another site which concentrates all the viewings. Why am I mentioning this fact? Because all of our research, the bulk of work that we have done, leads us to believe that this is not like an element not to be controlled. So the number of entities directly in charge of such websites is not that big after all. I will not dwell on other subcategories that we have delineated, but let me focus on the things that we can affect. One third of those 335 websites is 193 services and 37 operators in charge of them. And they had no effective safeguards built in whatsoever, the ones that Director Turowska mentioned a moment ago. 40% of those websites were even not equipped with the most plain safeguards, such as information boards, some information that in a moment you are about to view porn contents if someone has randomly accessed such a website. What is shocking is that pornography on the net is free of charge. 75% of it is free of charge, so there are no effective safeguards, there are no warning signs, and it is available free of charge. Every second of such website had a promotion component encouraging viewers to view other linked sites.
Teraz odbyła się jakaś.
And the most interesting part of our research was to check who's behind the process. Is it like a hydra that has hundreds of heads, or is it more simple? And as you can see from the layouts of the main sites, most of them are just the working of one single person. So there are different covers, but there is one person in charge. And it is quite striking and obvious to us that very few operators authorize such websites. The 12 biggest providers handle 76% of the Polish market. Mind you, I'm speaking about the situation in Poland. So if 12 providers started introducing some safeguards or removed contents, I would say that 3/4 of the total bulk of Polish pornography made available in Poland would be removed. So we are not fighting millions of operators, no. This is not such a mass phenomenon. And at this stage, let me hand over back to Madam Director. Yes, let me relate to you quite briefly what has happened. Unfortunately, our operations, which we related to the command of the Polish police and the prosecutor's office, because the chair of the National Broadcasting Council notified prosecutor's office. The prosecutor's office declined to take any action. We are now appealing back to the court because we have excellent legal advisors, legal opinions, excellent justification about our case. So we do hope that the Polish court of law will persuade the prosecutor's office to take the case. And when we spoke to the chief command of Polish police, relating to them how we worked on the case and how we identified providers, the gentlemen from the police, they nodded and they said, well, good job, good operational job, but nothing happened immediately afterwards. At present, we are just on the beginning of a process of cooperation with the police because we really invited them to join in cooperation with us. Nevertheless, whatever the chairman of the National Broadcasting is entitled to do was sufficient to produce quite a tangible result. We have managed to stir up trouble in this community, porn community, because they thought they are untouchable. And they were so amazed that the chair of the National Broadcasting Council has something to say. But we were persistent. And even if the prosecutor's office declined their involvement, we somehow managed to produce results. What happened? When they were summoned to present explanation, and if they received another summons after the second round of monitoring, some of them were scared. Some of them were scared enough And as you can see on the slide, 51% out of 193 websites stopped operating anymore. The 13%, which is visible on the slide, this is also an interesting case because on the one hand, the providers introduced a new way of safeguarding the contents using SMS with very high skyrocketing prices for accessing those services. But here we are obstinate. We don't think this is a sufficient safeguard because text messaging is available to any kid. But for 35% of such porn providers, we are in the process of administrative procedure, and at present, the chair is awarding fines to such providers. So we shall see what the final result will be. What else is to be said about what we have done? Maybe let me hand over to Michał in a moment. And just to round off my part of the presentation, what is happening in Europe at present is quite curious, interesting. So speaking to teachers, to all NGOs, to all stakeholders, I want to say that the European institutions are now preparing to amend the audiovisual directive as it stood. There is one thing to be noted in particular, because at present, the editorial liability for the contents rests with the country where content has been made available, has been published. However, it is now intended to introduce an amendment, and the recipient country should be in the focus. So if someone is broadcasting any contents with Polish subtitles or Polish dubbing, that means that the contents are to be made available to Polish viewers, Polish audiences, and the broadcaster, no matter where he sits, Paris, London, somewhere beyond Europe, he or she must abide by the Polish law. And I think that this is the homework we all need to do in order to make this change happen in the European legislation. For us, in our everyday life, what is most important is not to be indifferent, so that you, teachers, parents, you know that the institution where to bring your charges and complaints to is the National Broadcasting Council. We really managed to close effectively many websites because of individual grievances filed by viewers and audiences. Well, thank you. This is all from me. Michał?
Just a few words. Let me return to one more slide, because I would like us to sound too so optimistic how effective we are. 50% of websites have been removed. We are very pleased, and it shows that we have some impact and influence. And it's not, as many institutions suggest, that we cannot do anything, but please remember that the websites return to the free market. That content can be put back there every day, so we need to continue to monitor and remember that we are at the very beginning of the road, and we need to check this year what happened with the websites. Were they purchased? Who purchased them? Are these the entities belonging to the media moguls who are having the upper hand in the business? And 1% is interesting. Effective security, one website, it shows that a website with hardcore porn can be effectively protected and it can be a business model which this market could accept, because our goal as an institution is not to eliminate pornography altogether from internet, but to protect the minors and children and youth from pornography. Thanks. Thank you for this presentation and for the whole initiative to the Broadcasting Council, because it is really valuable. Ladies and gentlemen, maybe for now we are not able to do everything, but please respond, please react if you have any questions. Please use microphone. Good afternoon. I'm representing Institute of Educational Studies in Warsaw, and I'm also working with the youth, and undoubtedly the issue of pornography is a significant one, and we all teachers need to tackle this. This is important. I have two questions. First, how did you define porn in the first place? Because we as teachers, as specialists, as sexual educators have a problem with that, because under the Polish law there is no definition of pornography. So how it was defined in the first place? What do you mean by pornographic content? And secondly, which penalties or punishments the Broadcasting Council can impose on those who are promoting such websites? The penalties, well, in terms of the penalties, are up to 80,000 zlotych. And I will get it over to my colleague to answer the first question. Well, I will tell you more about the search engine. Well, we worked on this material. We started from 60,000 websites. They were searched. We used just a conventional search engine, and we were entering words which are associated with porn, and subsequently we use the snowball method, because every site refers you to yet another site, but we haven't really defined pornography. It was just it was just a choice of the words which are associated with pornography. I suggest that if you have such a possibility, because we operate on the following assumption. If an entrepreneur disagrees that this is a porn content, he can complain and go to the court. This is our approach, because if we were to start to negotiate and discuss with porn providers, I think it would be very difficult to come to an agreement. So he can complain, he can appeal against the penalty which is imposed by the Broadcasting Council. He can go to the court, and there was several such cases. The penalties on pornography which were imposed on providers were already imposed, and we won all the cases in the court. So it's not that the definition is so difficult that it is impossible to touch this issue. I have a question to the director on the design law changes. Well, we are talking about the safe content, but I have this red light flashing, because I was wondering if you could dwell more on this regulation, whether the new regulations which are to pertain to all the contents unsecure content. What is the permissible educational use? Because there are various. Well, right now, the situation is as follows. If we have an uplink station which uploads some content to the satellite, and it is located in Poland, and it broadcasts in Swahili to the heart of Africa, the editorial liability of what is being broadcasted rests with Poland and the Polish entity. If a person in Swahili is not happy with the content, let's say an individual from Cameroon, it turns out that he will have to reach an institution in Poland in order to be able to combat this content in the language and to make sure that it abides by his country's law. And these are the things that we have some problems with that, because even if we have some hate speech or internet sites, it is sufficient to locate the servers in Caribbean, then we have a real difficulty in order to go after them and to make sure that our law is abided by. And it needs to change, and it should change. And I don't want to talk about the specific details of the changes of this content.
Thank you for the interesting presentation. One small question, practical question. You mentioned that you have implemented research during which you found out all these many websites, but what about the everyday work? How, because, well, you never know, maybe there are some new websites getting online, and do you wait for some parent or someone sending a complaint to you, or you are also monitoring yourself? Thank you.
Odpowiem po polsku.
Let me answer in Polish. Both, of course, we are gathering the complaints, and we are staying in touch, and we are responding, and we are reacting. There is no single complaint that would go unanswered immediately. With regard to our everyday work that you were asking about, well, we do monitor of some of the largest top 20 or top 50 of our large providers, and we are serving them in many terms, and this is our regular monitoring. What we've done for the first time, but it is not for the last time. In the fall, we are launching the second round using the same methodology, and we are going to continue this activity as long as they get bored or they get away from Poland to the Caribbean, or else they will follow the Polish law. Thank you very much. I know it's controversial.